Hey everybody, this is Lightning 3D Creations, Lightning Matt speaking. Today I'm going over the Tronxy X5SA Pro. Initially doing an inventory of all the pieces, and then I'm going to slowly put it together. Don't worry, I'm not going to video the entire assembly, but I will show key parts of it. But just go over the items real quick. The X5SA Pro, very similar to the X5SA and X5S before it. They've made some upgrades along the way, but the build size area is the same. The structure, general structure of it is the same. And as you can see, it comes with some of the similar items people will recognize. You have the sample filament, the USB drive with an adapter that comes with it to give you necessary files and initial STL files for test prints. You have your cables for USB and power. You have a wire wrap to hide your wiring. You have a few different bags with various screws in them. One thing I've found from this company is they include a lot of extra screws, so you'll have plenty left over. Your clips for your bed, some tie wraps for the wiring, a few standard tools, the little spatula, which actually I've come to like a lot, the one I got from my other kit. You have your belts. You have your power supply and the case for the motherboard with the attached LCD screen. Now the LCD screen comes zip tied to this. You have to cut the zip ties off and mount the LCD in the front place, and we'll show you that later on. Then you have the hot bed or bed plate. Comes pre-wired with its cable chain attached. Comes with a nice surface for printing on. There is a little bit of protective plastic both on the heat bed and on the back side of the the print board that you have to clean off. Then you have the 2020 rails, the 2040 rails, the standard Z guide, the bed plate mounting boards, the linear rails for the Z axis, a few various attachments for different components that we'll show as you go up. The actual Z rail guides on either side. You have the X and Y motors already mounted, the left and right side for the belts, and the two Z motors, and then the filament sensor detection already mounted on a adapter for it. One thing about these pieces here, they are the only piece of non-metal in the build, and they do come with a little brown protective cover on it to keep them from getting scratched in shipping that you have to peel off. I find that it's easiest just to loosen up the screws, take the motor out, peel it off on both sides, and put it back together. You have a standard hot end that came with the X5SA. It's got the silicone on it. It's got the auto leveling sensor. It's already mounted on its board to go on its linear rail. It's already got all the wiring done through a cable chain all the way back here to a mount for the back side, and then that goes to a ribbon cable that will come all the way down here to the box. So instead of having to wire up a whole bunch of individual cables, you have a single ribbon cable for it. Two of the main upgrades that you have with this kit, one is that the extruder is a Titan model extruder. So it's a lot better than the original extruders that came in the X5S and X5SA, able to use flexible filaments. We'll test that out. And then the other main upgrade for this, instead of using 2020 rails to run the X and Z or X and Y axis on, now you have actual linear rails for that. So a lot smoother movement, should be less wear on them. Now a few other things I recommend you bring prior to doing one of these builds. I always bring my own little toolkit with extra screwdrivers and whatnot, extra tie wraps, you never have enough of those, extra zip ties, Velcro, and then some extra wire wrap tied in Bowden tube, and a little bit extra heat tape in case we need that. We shouldn't for this build. A couple of the upgrades I'm going to put on this one. The first one that I really like is this upgrade. These are an alternate way to mount the cable chain for the hot end. So this cable chain, when it's mounted per directions, mounts horizontally, and it tends to sag over time. This design that I downloaded, it came from a guy on Thingiverse. M8118 is his username. I'll put a link in the post, but basically this allows you to mount the cable chain vertically, at a low profile, so it goes up and over instead of across, and it doesn't sag over time. The other upgrade that I'm going to put on here is basically some 2020 corner mounts. Even though the 2020 does fit in nice and tight, it's better to have it a little bit more stiff than basically as it comes. And then the last thing I want to do is I'm going to put this Chimera hot end on it. So I have the dual extrusion hot end. So I've got a separate extruder for that. I've got the separate hot end. I'm not going to put that on it right away. Initially, I'm going to mount the factory supplied hot end, go through all the testing of it and everything, and make sure everything works out of the box before I go in and start changing anything like that and potentially making it not work. But that's it for right now. Like I said, I'm going to start on the assembly, and then I'll come back to it and show you as some of this stuff gets put together. Welcome back, everybody. I've finished the build of my Tronxy X5SA Pro. I've got it set it up here in the office and printing right next to my X5SA. Figure it's a good place for it. I've got a bunch of my builds right around it. But I wanted to show you some of the things that I was talking about on how I upgraded the Pro model and some of the differences between the Pro model and the X5SA. First off, main difference on the X5SA, like we talked about, is these linear rails. So you notice the difference here. You got a carriage with linear rails as compared to the X5SA, which has just a 2020 extrusion with bearings rolling along it. And the X5SA works fine in that regard, but it does rub some inside there. So these are all metal, a lot smoother movement and cleaner. The problem is the linear rail is actually shorter than the 2020. So the bracket up here for the belts doesn't quite fit. It's off by about 4 mils. So what the book says to do is to tighten down these two screws and just use this screw for alignment, but don't tighten it down. Well, that doesn't make much sense to me. I think all the screws should be tight. So what I did, what I saw other people post about, you put a couple washers underneath the plate for this screw, enough that you can mount it, and the piece here won't flex, it won't bend, it won't throw off your alignment, and that allows you to tighten that screw down. You're not worried about it flexing anymore. The other upgrade that they did for this model is the Titan extruder, which you can see in the back. Now the way the Titan extruder aligns, they put it right in the center, coming up from the filament, and that allows the Bowden tube to come straight out to the print head, trying to keep it as straight as possible with minimum resistance. For any printing, that's good, but the main reason for that is, the Titan is specially designed to be able to handle flexible filaments, and that gives it a little bit more ease in doing it if you don't have that extra length of tubing to have to go through. Now for right now, I just have the Bowden loosely up here, like see, loosely tie wrapped onto the cable chain, because I haven't cut it yet to its shorter length that I would need it at, and that's mainly because I am going to take off this entire assembly and put on the Chimera nozzle like I talked about. So until I have that actually ready and installed, I'm not going to do the final cutting the Bowden tube. I'm not going to do the final wrapping of the wiring, because honestly my OCD is going crazy with the wiring like that as compared to the other ones that's all neat. So like I said, that was one of the upgrades that they did, was the Titan extruder and the linear rails. Also they have a 32-bit board inside there, which I think my X5SA came with, because it was one of the newer models of the X5SAs. But it's a stronger board than the original X5S. Now, a couple of the upgrades that I did, like I talked about the cable chain itself, the original design of the cable chain has it coming out in a horizontal alignment. And if it's horizontal, it would be right about here, and as you can see, it's pretty close to the belts already. As it gets a little bit old, it sags and rubs on these belts. My X5SA, when I first set it up in the horizontal arrangement, it was rubbing in about a week and a half. So as you can see on the X5SA, I actually put on the same adapters that I did with this one. And like I said, I found these on Thingiverse. I'll put a link in the comments. But basically there's a mount that you put here on the plate. There's a bearing that goes underneath that, and then a little cap. Same thing on the back side. You get a mount plate. There's a bearing under there, and then the cap. And this one I'll pop off because it's fine moving like that as long as I hold it. But you can see basically it just floats on that bearing. Now when you mount these in, you do need to pay attention to the screws. The screws should go down into it, so you have the screw caps on top, and they're not going to cut into the wiring here. Also on this side, I can't really get to that, but on this side you want to make sure the screws don't protrude into where the bearing is sitting. So if you have to, you know, go out and buy some extra screws. I actually used the little silver screws that came with this portion of the mounting, and it worked fine, and there was the right depth. But it all depends on the screws that you give you. So that was one of the upgrades. The other upgrade I did for these is I put in some extra 20/20 90-degree corner brackets in a few of the various locations to help tighten everything up. Like I said, you don't have to have them, especially in the locations where there's other stuff. Like this has the Y-axis end stop bracket, but it helps firm everything up and helps keep it a little bit square. Now as you can see, it's printing fine. I actually printed 2 of the test models on it initially. I printed the little cube that comes with almost every model just to make sure that it's printing properly. I printed their little cap model here to check. It actually checks for stringing for you and checks for the overhang and whatnot. Printed out fine. So I went ahead and moved into printing a couple of projects that I promised some other people. As you can see, I've got this one printing almost the exact same project, or the exact same project. But basically it's a little baby Yoda figure with the cup. You know, I got the body here. I haven't removed any of the supports yet, but I got the head printing there, and as you can see, it's printing nice and smooth inside there. But those are the upgrades that I put on so far. Not a lot done to it. The printer runs smooth. The fans are not that loud, so I don't think I'll have to replace those right away. Like I said, on the original X5SA model, I replaced this fan and this fan almost as soon as I got it because they were quite loud. But these are a little bit loud, but they're nothing like what the other ones were, so I think they're fine. Other than that, really the only other upgrade I plan on doing is the Chimera hot end on this. So of course I'll have to add the extra extruder and all that. Once I get that done, I'll update and show everybody how that works. But happy with the build. I've got 4 prints out of it already that were successful. Everything else I think will go fine. Oh, I did want to mention the print itself. A lot of people ask these questions. I'm printing this out of PLA. It's 1.75 millimeter PLA marble. It's made by 3D Solutech. Let's see, that company right there. I've been very happy with their marble. I've used a few of the other types, a few other brands, and a few other types from 3D Solutech, but this one always seems to print very nicely, very little problems, and you can paint it for whatever color you want, so it works well for models. Other than that, I said I'll update everybody as my builds go through, and I'll update once I get the Chimera hot end on it. Thank you. Have a nice day.